God only knows what that is, but he's about to tell us all about it. Thank you very much, Anthony. Give him a round of applause, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing today? Who here knows what a DAO is? If you could raise your hand, just so I can get an idea. Okay, basically everybody, which is fantastic. Yes, the clicker would be super important. Thank you very much. Okay, so since we all know about DAOs, we'll try and keep this, go a little bit deeper. I'll be talking about DAO modularity. I work for Aragon. We launched the first DAO framework back in about 2017. There's some wonderful projects that are built on this DAO framework, including Lido, decentralised, Curve. It was sort of the first time that organizations could easily spin up complex on-chain organizations. And those back then were almost entirely all on-chain. And we've seen a bit of a reversion from that. But the great thing is my speech will segue right into Sacha, who will be coming up after me, who's from Lido, who will talk more about that. So yeah, we have a lot of learnings because we built in 2017. This is a long time ago in the crypto world, as you can imagine. And a few years ago, we decided to build an entirely new framework. This is a really, really big decision. When you have over $40 billion in TVL on your smart contract or your protocol, to build something entirely new that has no Lindy is quite a big decision to make. And we made this decision because of several learnings after speaking with some of these projects and their needs. And we sort of came around to one big need was the lack of adaptability that these DAOs had. They were basically relatively stuck on their old stacks. And the other stack, which also will be talked about today by Cool Horse Girl, opens up on Governor. And these stacks are monolithic DAO frameworks. They're very, very powerful. It's where most DAOs exist today. But the problem we've learned from them is that the ability for them to adapt over time, very, very, very challenging. The minute you have to touch a code base that has your entire, controls your entire protocol and all its assets, this can become very dangerous, very complex. And so to date, there have been very few DAOs that have made any big changes in their core governance because of this. So we thought, okay, how do we change this? How do we fix this? So we have to build something modular. So we built Aragon OSX. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so state of governance today. We always hear this DAOs don't work sort of phrase, which is sort of silly, let's be honest. But why they aren't working is because they have a lack of reliable, secure governance options that fit their needs. Generic DAO structures don't work for everybody. You can't assume that every organization is going to be the exact same. It doesn't make any sense. But that's currently the state of the industry right now. You launch a DAO, and it's either going to be one of sort of three options. You're going to launch a delegate voting DAO, you're going to launch a VE token DAO, or you're going to launch, which I don't believe is an even DAO, but an off-chain DAO with a trusted multi-sig. So there's sort of like three options. That's what you get. If you want to go beyond that, you need to start building custom. And so we've realized that organizations shouldn't be stuck in a cookie cutter sort of operational framework. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't allow them to grow. It doesn't allow them to adjust to their needs, right? And so some organizations have dealt with this okay. Lido being a great example. They have resources, they have time, they have developers, they're able to build custom. But obviously not every organization can do that. Not every organization, actually most organizations don't have a lot of resources. So how can we make governance safer, easier, and faster to build? Because organizations should be changing all the time. And so we had to reinvent the DAO framework, as I mentioned. So we're not going to get too technical, trying to keep it high level. Basically, we've separated in this new framework the actual DAO contracts themselves from what we call plugins, which is the governance logic. Now, why is this so important? It's important because now you can change your governance on the fly without touching probably 90% plus of the code base. And this is really, really important because this reduces a lot of risk. You only need to change necessarily a plugin from, let's say, from a multi-sig to token holder voting to digital identification voting. And the premise of the protocol is not based on one type of governance methodology, which is what you see today, token-based voting or multi-signature account voting. Actually, it's completely, it doesn't require any of these. It's permissions. It's based on permissions. So it can be, as I mentioned, digital identification based. It can be expand beyond the simple sort of methodologies we have today, because who knows what kind of governance we're going to need tomorrow. And if we can't change in 5 years, 10 years, well, how are our organizations going to survive? So with this new methodology, as I described, you can easily uninstall and install these plugins, sort of like apps on your computer. And so you, as I said, you could literally change your governance or different methodologies of how you want to govern without touching most of the code base. And as I'll mention in a minute, you can get network effects. So rather than the current methodology of forking an entire code base to then build your DAO, if a plugin already exists, so a governance methodology, let's say optimistic dual governance, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can just take that plugin and plug it into your DAO. It already has Lindy. It may already be audited. You don't need to do any coding at all. So this is really, really important. So you can start to build these network effects, and you can start to get a governance marketplace where any governance methodology built before a new DAO can simply install into their DAO, and their holders, token holders, or their members can start participating right away. So it's more safe and secure. It's more adaptable, right? Because you can actually change quite easily, and it has network effects. We can no longer, expect to reach the entire world with our technology if everybody has to fork something, get an audit which costs $25,000 to $100,000, and know how to be, a developer. That's not scalable. So here are some examples. Like, I always think it's just really easy to think about examples. Like, what are some cool things we can build, right? So about 7 or 8 months ago, we launched this multi-chain governance plugin with ZK Sync and Layer 0. So what are some of the cool things about this? So this can be a simple plugin that can allow your DAO to have its members have its token on any Layer 2 chain. They can pull the voting power from that Layer 2 chain. They can vote from any of those chains. And then the DAO can live on the Layer 1 on Ethereum itself and execute from there. So now we have a higher level of security. We have really low voter costs. Now we're getting down to a few cents versus what could have been, in a bull market, like $30 to vote, potentially, on mainnet. And the DAO can stay where it's most safe and most liquid, which is on mainnet. So these are some of the things we can do with that. And this is sort of what it looks like. So you can create a custom census with tokens across any chain, cast low-cost votes, execute the action across chains simultaneously. Super, super easy. And this is going to allow us to start to move more of our voting back on-chain, which we're seeing happening off-chain because of high voter costs. And what does this do? This increases voter participation. So here is another great example, which will segue straight into what Sacha will talk about, which is optimistic dual governance. So this is where you have several or 2 stakeholder groups. Let's say, for example, the core team of your protocol can put up a proposal, your token holders can vote on it, and an X or other person can veto that proposal. So you're trying to keep the right checks and balances here. So why do we love governance minimized methodologies like this? Well, we're struggling in our industry to get enough voters to pass proposals. We're struggling to get enough delegates who are high context, who can actually make decisions on a protocol upgrade, which we can't assume most of us can do. And we can't even find enough people to do that with all the protocols launching. So what does this allow? It allows for a core team, a core group of people to work optimistically, but they can be vetoed by token holders or by X, whomever, to keep those checks and balances. And this is really important because as we've seen by the FIT 21 bill that was recently put forward in the United States, regulatory concerns are big concerns. And decentralization is basically going to be, and we think, non-negotiable. This is a methodology where you create more of a permissioned flow, so only X people can put up a proposal. However, it's up to all token holders to decide if that proposal should pass or not. So it allows you to move more effectively. New organizations may not want to have every token holder voting on every proposal. Instead, they may want to move faster, more optimistically, but make sure that checks and balances are in place. Token holders can veto them if they want. it's just one methodology, right? And there's not one methodology that's going to work for everybody. That's what's so important. So I'll let Sacha talk a lot more about that in a minute. And so you get to a stage where this is actually a huge roll-up. Can't say the name. We're going to launch on Aragon in the next month or two. Yes, very confusing, doesn't it look like it? But this is what you can start to get. You can get a combination of the two things I just mentioned. So you can have a small group of people, experts of their protocol or blockchain, can be the only ones to put up a proposal. If that proposal gets created by that group, it can move over to where token holders can veto it. And the great thing here is this roll-up itself, you can have your tokens on their blockchain and also veto it. So from mainnet or from the secondary, the roll-up itself. So now you can have voters voting for a few cents. They can veto an optimistic proposal. And because they want to be safe to start, they have the ability to actually bypass here. If the multi-sig passes with a supermajority of 10 out of 13, they can skip the veto process and anonymously, with an anonymous payload, pass an emergency proposal to secure the blockchain itself. So you have checks and balances, you have security implementations in place, you have anonymous payloads, and you have super cheap voting. So you start to be able to put these composable modular blocks together to create a really great governance system that is adaptable, and that people can actually participate in without having to participate in every single proposal that goes up. Because I am not a high-level engineer. I'm not going to be able to read the Polygon proposal or the proposal on Ethereum or the proposal on any big blockchain and tell them that payload's not correct. But there are trusted people who can veto that, who I know, who are very smart. So these are the cool systems you can start to create. And we can move away from this cookie-cutter methodology where we're all stuck working in the same governance types or methodologies, and we can start to actually experiment with governance, try new things, adapt, adjust as organizations should. So it really opens up a lot of doors and is very, very exciting. So what does that lead to? As I said, future-proof governance. And I think this is one of the most essential things we need to start working on is we need to look 5 years and 10 years ahead, not what can I do now. And future-proof governance, can withstand whatever the world throws at it. We can no longer have, as I said, organizations that are unable to adapt or change. They have to be able to more easily and with less security assumptions and risks make these adjustments. And they have to be able to experiment because every organization out there is experimenting. So this is something that we've launched recently in the last year and a half. Very, very excited about it. We think it's going to take sort of the industry to a new paradigm in terms of governance. And yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Anthony, for your super cool fastness and speed. Has anyone got any questions? There's a couple of minutes left. Sacha's got questions, but Sacha's giving a presentation in a second. Should we vote on it? Should Sacha be allowed to have a question?
Yeah, that is one of the most contentious questions in our industry. It's very, very funny, and it's a good question. I look at a DAO on two layers. There's the technological layer, and there's the social layer. And it requires both to actually be a DAO at the end of the day. So I believe that there's this grand, and I'll get into that too a sec. I think there's this grand thing called Onchain organizations. This is an organization that is operating on the blockchain. What makes a DAO special is obviously the D and the A, the decentralized aspect and the autonomous aspect. The decentralized aspect, I believe there are two layers to it. One is it's decentralized to some degree, I don't know how much, on the social layer. This means, in today's context, who are the token holders? Who are the people with power to execute an action within that organization, right? Obviously the FIT bill was saying that no more than 20% can be owned by one person. I believe it should be whatever helps your organization get to its intended state. So if your organization is like Lido, for example, I believe you need to be more decentralized. You want more resiliency. You're a very important organization, so you want a more wider token holder base or DAO member base. And then there's the decentralized on the technological aspect. So you have the social aspect, token holders, and then you have the technology. The fact that it's built on a blockchain, on decentralized technology, is extremely important. That creates transparency, trustlessness, and that trustlessness is what the autonomous aspect is. And this is that not one particular actor can take over this or said organization. It can do what it wants to do, and that's important. So that means it lives on the blockchain. It can operate trustlessly. So I don't believe if you add a trusted multisig in, that is the only thing that can execute an action that the DAO puts forward, say sending money from A to B, or I don't believe that actually is a DAO. I know that means I have a very strict definition of what a DAO is. Most people are like, well, if you're just voting and people are voting, and that's a DAO, and I don't personally believe that. I believe that's probably more of an on-chain organization, and a DAO is a very small subset of on-chain organizations that is really decentralized on the technological and social layer and autonomous in its decisions it wants to make from legal, regulatory, or on-chain members. Thoughts on that, Sacha? No worries. Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah, cool. I'm very close friends with Ben. He used to be on the Aragon team, actually. Yeah, very cool. Great question. I would say right now, from we're more focused on token-based funding. Why? Because that is what the industry is asking for, and that's what's moving forward. However, the great thing about OSX, we specifically designed it to be agnostic to that, which Ben really loves. Again, its focal point is around permissions and who has permission to do what, right? And so that means that, you can just have wallet-based voting, one person, one vote. You can have digital identification-based voting. So we've kept it open. That was very important to us, future-proof governance, right? But right now our focus is on token-based voting because that is what's really important right now. I don't want to say it's proven, but it definitely certainly hasn't proven to be super, super effective. But it's the main methodology. But you can add layers in, right? Like you can have token voting and then add in councils that might be one person, one vote. You can add in, other aspects as well. But I know you guys are doing great work on that.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry to have to cut you short, Anthony. You're hanging around for most of the day, I think. Really, really great conversation and a super kickstarter to this morning's talks and workshops. Thanks a million, Anthony. Sacha, do you want to hop up here? So Sacha and Anthony, well done. Sacha and Anthony work together and have a history of working together, so they had arranged that this presentation would follow the last.
Actually, it was a coincidence. But then, because we saw it was a coincidence, we then
Serendipity, it's a beautiful thing. Great. I'll.
Should I start or should I wait for my slides? I don't have a good one. Like I don't have a succinct one. It's like you know one when you see it, but it's very hard to articulate precisely. Like it's hard to come up with a definition where you can't think of an exception. Okay. Okay, so I'm Sacha. I'm at Lido Research, which is like 2 people, but it's growing. And I want to talk about dual governance, which actually was It's been like an 18-month research endeavor, not really led by me, but led by other core contributors. And I'm sort of the mouthpiece. I mean, I've helped with ideation and just acting as a contrarian voice, but I don't really deserve credit for this work. I'm more communicating it. So one of the guiding principles behind this is this concept of trust minimization. And that has to do with trust assumptions, especially like to get back to like what is a DAO and why does it matter. I think part of designing these systems is designing them to be resistant against dishonest majorities. So like that's, you know, at the base layer, that's kind of, you know, that has to do with the whole being able to fork, right? Anyone can fork, any subset of a community can fork and say, actually, we believe that this is more aligned with our values. When you're building a smart contract that's tightly integrated to a base layer, that becomes less obvious. It's very difficult to just fork a contract. It's possible, there's research directions that way, but it's much more complex and difficult to do. So you have to think a little bit outside the box. And this really has to do with self-sovereignty, and in Lido's case, user sovereignty, right? So one of the objectives is to prevent LDO holders from, I mean, if you're depositing into, if you're using Lido to stake, then you're getting STETH. You have done that under a specific social contract, right, that existed. It's in code. The problem is here, you have a system that can be upgraded because, you know, for one, the Ethereum protocol is changing, so you can't completely ossify the smart contract. And for two, you know, you might have these edge case scenarios where you have a bug that can lead to, you know, the need to upgrade quickly. So you need to at least keep these upgrade powers present for the foreseeable future, as long as the base protocol keeps changing, and as long as you haven't like formally verified key parts of the code and isolated them, that, you know, making it more modular essentially. So those two things I think will happen with time, but right now there is a need to upgrade. So how do you keep this ability to upgrade without kind of rugging users, right? Without saying, okay, we're going to change the terms of the social contract under you, and without your consent. So right now, you know, this is just a list of LDO powers that can affect users. You can upgrade the protocol code. You can manage the list of the Oracle committee members, change how stake is distributed between node operators, change the governance structure, change how much fees you're taking in, and decide how to spend the treasury. So all of these ones, apart from maybe treasury spends, directly affect stakers, directly affect users, right? And most users aren't paying attention to what's going on, so they can be affected in a way that they don't consent to. So the main idea behind dual governance is to allow STETH holders to exit even under worst case scenarios. And I'll get into more as to, you know, exactly how that's designed. But I want to start with talking about, like, just zooming out a bit, right? Why are we here? Why does it, why does this matter? And comes back to, like, again, like, why are we building DAOs and not organizations? I mean, the main difference between TradFi and DeFi, in my mind at least, is this 5 minutes, okay. Is this ability to exit is this ability to exit even if the protocol is failing, right? So like if you have your money in a bank or in Coinbase or somewhere that is, you know, has a traditional shareholder structure, if that entity fails, and FTX was an example of this, I mean Silicon Valley Bank was another example of this, you as a user, you're not guaranteed to get your funds intact. You're not guaranteed to get your funds out. It's possible that, you know, again, you can be rugged. Now, how we deal with that in practice is we rely on a central entity like a government to give you certain guarantees, right? So if you have, you know, up to 100,000, I think, in the UK, in your bank account, that's guaranteed by the government if that bank fails. But over that, it's not, right? Like, in a sense, if Coinbase were to collapse, they have an obligation to their shareholders first, and even they have an obligation to their debtors first, then their shareholders, and then you as a user, right? So the only way you can get around this within our existing systems is to rely on this government and give them more power to bail you out, essentially, which leads to misaligned incentives, right? Which leads to, I would argue, the mess we're in now with respect to the financial system. So that's a lot of like high-level philosophy, but the point I'm trying to make here is on-chain DeFi actually allows us to break out of this paradigm and give guarantees to users that don't require them to depend on a government helping them out. And so we need to design our systems that stay true to this. Otherwise, we might as well be building TradFi organizations. Okay, I'll just get a glass of drink of water, and then I'll go into why this is more complex than previous mechanisms that have been used. So part of the complication here is that you could, like, the initial instinctive reaction is say, why don't we just have vanilla ragequit? Why don't we just let users exit whenever they want? To a certain extent, this already happens, right? You can, like, go on Uniswap and swap your STE for ETH instantly. But if you're trying to, if everyone wants to exit at the same time, this doesn't work, right? You have a finite amount of liquidity. Maybe you can get 100,000 ETH out, but you can't get 1 million ETH out instantly. And you can't get 10 million ETH out. So you need to rely on something else. And one thing that makes it especially complicated in the Ethereum case is you have this notion of a exit queue that is kind of unbounded. Like, you can't really put an upper limit on worst case scenarios how long it takes to process a withdrawal. It depends on a bunch of factors. So in the worst case, it can take years, right, to exit with your funds intact. So just having a simple vanilla ragequit doesn't work. I'm not sure if this is working anymore. I'm not able to. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so same reason why we can't use a simple time lock. Like there's no upper limit on how long it can take to get out. even if there was, like you have many people using their STETH in other applications, and it can take time to unwind from that. And so again, there isn't an easy way you can guarantee exit for everyone by setting a certain time as the upper limit of the time lock. So the solution here sounds complicated, but it's not really that complex. It's a dynamic time lock with two phases, right? So you have two thresholds. You have one threshold that's quite low. It can be maybe 2% of all STETH in circulation. If 2% of users vote to sound the alarm or veto or exit, however you want to frame it, it extends the time lock for a longer period of time, and more users can join. And the more users join, essentially, the longer this time lock is extended. So to give you a couple of more concrete examples. How long do I have? It's okay. I'll go through these quite quickly. This is like a happy path examples, right? So let's say LDO holders vote to kick out a node operator out of the set for no good reason. A small group of users can pick up on this and vote to veto. This allows more users to join the proposal. While this is happening, the DAO is actually blocked from executing anything. So the DAO is essentially frozen, apart from treasury spends. Now, this gives time for LDO holders to kind of de-escalate or change their mind or sort of cancel their own proposal. And if this happens, then STETH holders can also cancel their veto, and the DAO resumes normal functioning. In the unhappy path, let's say an LDO holder wants to change the STETH withdrawal contract to make it, upgrade the withdrawal contract to make it impossible for users to withdraw. Same, number 2 is pretty much the same as before. Like a small group picks up on this, let's say 2% of holders, more people start joining. The DAO remains frozen until everyone that's joined is able to fully withdraw their ETH. Once this happens, then the DAO reverts back to its normal state, unless there's another veto motion already in progress because of another proposal, in which case this kind of loops back into the same thing, and the DAO remains frozen for another cycle. So again, the main idea here is to ensure the right of exit under the most extreme scenarios, which is, for me, why crypto exists. I'll skip over this. So as to the timeline, this has been approved by LDO holders. Contributors have started on a technical implementation. The optimistic timeline is testnet deployment in Q3 and mainnet in Q4. And while this is an important step, it's in no way the final step. So this is really a minimal viable V1. And then there are questions, okay, over whether this can be extended to all ETH holders, not just STETH holders. There's also the role of node operators, right? You can think of, like, there are ways to give forkability to the Lido protocol, but it also involves thinking about node operators and how they choose to fork. So it becomes a little bit more complex, but I think it's a very interesting avenue of research. I mean, I'd personally like to see a Lido that is extremely easy to fork. And then there's the role of, okay, can we also think about delegating STETH veto power? What are the issues with that? Yeah, so this is really, credit here belongs to Sam, Eugene, Sam especially, but Sam, Eugene, Victor, P. Sirex, Hasu, Izzy, Vasily, many others. I'm not the main driver here. If you'd like to contribute or have any thoughts on this, please do get in touch. I'm Sacha at Lido.fi. There's a lot of exciting research along these lines, and we could do with more eyes and more brain power, as well as just people who are interested in communicating about it, or even learning more in terms of like thinking about how to use Aragon to do something similar, or things like that. That should be a QR code that links to a research post that if you scroll to the bottom, you'll be able to see a lot of links that relate to what I've just said. I think I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sacha. If you end up, I don't know, buying magic mushrooms or something there, you can tell it's been hacked, his QR code. That's no reflection on the man himself. That completely just popped into my head. Thanks a million, Sacha. I really, really appreciate that. Some really, really interesting discussions. I feel like we've only opened the box on some of the work that's happening here. So thank you very much for that intro, and Anthony as well. We're going to introduce Cool Horse Girl now. She's going to talk, I think, more to the business side, looking at how to consider decentralizing governance in your DAO. So here we go.
Hey guys, yeah, it's really good to be here. I'm super excited to speak with you all. I'm definitely going a bit higher level than I think a few of the presentations have been. So I was looking at the decks this morning, and there's some that get quite in depth that I can talk about. So in the end of this presentation, I'll tell you sort of what I'm interested in and thinking about, and we can talk about it later. But I'm gonna lay this out as sort of, if you have an organization in crypto, at some point it's going to need to be decentralized, whether that's now or in years to come. And these are the things you're gonna have to think about. Sweet. Okay, I'm Cool Horse Girl, or CHD. My real name is Mads, but I've sort of locked myself into this when I was about 15, so here we are. Like I said, I'm going to do an overview of DAO governance and credible neutrality and why those are important to every crypto organization, not just DAOs, like we say. I want to make sure by the end of this presentation, even if you don't grasp or care about every single part of it, you have a few takeaways that you can think about as you work in your crypto organization, and then also if you have a hackathon project. My Twitter is CoolHorseGirl2. If you ever need to reach me, my Telegram's CoolHorseGirl, nothing. Yeah, let's get started. Okay, I'm gonna start with a story here. So we know Farmville, right? It was a game I think many of us played in like year 7, approximately. So Farmville was a game built on top of Facebook. The stats on it are actually fucking insane if you look at them. People were using Facebook at one point predominantly for Farmville to some degree, right? So people would log into Facebook, only use Farmville, don't touch their feed, don't touch Messenger, and log off of Facebook. Farmville started out free, right, and transitioned into premium, like all of we do, and ended up charging fees to buy, grain for your farm, keep your farm alive, types of gamey stuff. And Facebook realized this, right, and Mark Zuck eventually said that this can go on no longer. So because Farmville was built on top of Facebook, which is obviously a centralized organization, they ended up completely fucking over Farmville and Zynga, the company that built Farmville. So think about this example as we sort of talk about why it matters for the rest of this presentation. Everything sufficiently large must be decentralized, and this Farmville, Zynga, Facebook example is exactly why. So if you build on top of a layer that is not credibly neutral, which is meaning something that treats everything that builds on top of it fairly and without preference, then you're going to get rugged by the layer itself, just like Zynga did by Facebook. So in the end, Facebook ended up, like I said, completely fucking over Zynga. They charged fees to Zynga to keep its platform Farmville on Facebook, ended up completely draining the company dry, and Farmville and Zynga itself ended up shutting down because literally they were rugged by Facebook, the layer they built on. So you can think about this exact example basically, right? When you think about what protocols to build on top of. Do you feel comfortable trusting, you know, the random dude you met at the hackathon that swears he won't rug you when his when your thing gets more popular than his thing that it's built on top of? This is Dennison, the Tally CEO. I guess I should say, I tried to make it not too much of a shill fest, but Tally is the like main governance platform. If you've heard of, you know, DAOs like Arbitrum, Optimism, Aave, Gitcoin, they run their governance on Tally. This is the CEO basically stating what I just said. If your stack is on Facebook, you're the next Zynga. If your stack is on a non-credibly neutral layer, you're also the next Zynga. It makes sense, right? If I build a protocol and something gets more successful on top of me, obviously I want a slice of the pie. And obviously, I'm going to rip those funds and rug that layer. Yep, iterating the same thing. Okay. So you need to make sure that the place you build on top of is credibly neutral. A way you can do that is by making sure that that place is a DAO. You also need to make sure that the DAO is actually run on-chain. Organizations are not truly credibly neutral unless they are run on chain. So we think about governance in crypto. There's many things that call themselves a DAO and fewer that actually are them. So DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, absolutely have to run on chain for it to be a DAO. I'll give another quick story here. If you don't run your governance on chain, the actions that are meant to be executed via proposal are not actually permissionlessly executed. So like I say, it's not credibly neutral. If Facebook was an off-chain DAO, right, fake DAO, and somebody voted to let Zynga live on Facebook without rugging them, Facebook as a centralized layer could easily just ignore that vote if it's off-chain. So real DAOs run on-chain, meaning that the proposals are permissionlessly executed. So once the community votes on something, it actually does go through, no matter what the higher-ups or A16Z, if you are following the recent Uniswap drama, end up thinking. This is why credibly neutral means on-chain and why on-chain is important for the layer you want to build on. Okay, what is DAO governance? I think we're somewhat familiar after the first few presentations here, but I'll just give maybe an overview of some of the quick components. Token-based voting, proposals, and delegation is what makes up DAO governance. I often think of DAO governance as like an extremely direct democracy. So when I explain it to like my boomer grandparents who care deeply about American politics, I tell them, you basically have to delegate your vote to one of two dudes, right? The Republican dude or the Democrat dude. In DAO governance, you can delegate your vote to, in this example, literally anyone else in the world, and they can vote for you. So you delegate your vote to any wallet address, and they basically absorb your voting power, which can be revoked at any time, and is delegations going through many unique iterations. And that's how the organization runs. Whatever is actually voted on chain goes through. Many of these are financial decisions. DAOs can control different things to different degrees of centralization. That's another thing that you're going to want to think about when you're building on a credibly neutral layer, is how credibly neutral actually is the layer, right? Is the protocol upgrades on chain? Arbitrum is extremely decentralized, for example, with protocol upgrades on chain, actually chain control of both Arbitrum and all of its orbit chains are voted on chain, as well as the treasury. Some organizations are far less actually on chain, decentralized, incredibly neutral. So just the level to which you're comfortable getting potentially rugged, right? This is just a cool thing, and I think the last time I put the company name in the thing, but this is cool. Tally and the CEO Dennison had this view of governance as the underpinning of a thriving, successful, decentralized ecosystem all the way back in 2020. And it still stands today, right? So we see more and more organizations are decentralizing, right? Every L2 that you've heard of is probably decentralizing. Every L2 that's worth trusting is decentralizing. Bit more on on-chain versus off-chain governance. Many think of this, if they're vaguely familiar with the governance landscape, they think of Tally, which does on-chain governance, and Snapshot, which does off-chain governance. In many ways, they can be complementary toward each other, but they're not really directly competing. Like I said, with on-chain, it's on-chain proposal, on-chain vote, and trustless execution. With off-chain, it requires this level of social trust. Like I said, you have to trust the random dude you met at the hackathon that he won't end up screwing you when your thing gets more popular than his thing. Yeah, like I said, top teams in the ecosystem are decentralizing or have already decentralized themselves. This is becoming an absolutely important thing to do. For vibes, right? I think, like I said, you don't have the confidence to build on top of a layer that isn't credibly neutral. And then also for legal matters, we see the Wyoming DUNA legislation has actually made it possible for DAOs to pay people based on work they do, which is governance and staking. But to do that, they actually truly have to be decentralized and actually do have to have on-chain governance. Running out of time, skip that one. Okay. Yeah, so why is governance actually critical in DAOs? It ensures the fairness, transparency, and accountability of the slide that I just skipped. So, like I said, it's easy to rug people behind closed doors. I try to explain also to my boomer grandparents, if you think about all the decisions that are made by gigantic conglomerates, right? Like what happens in Exxon stays behind closed doors, and why do you think it does? Probably because they're doing some sketchy shit. That's why DAOs empower this level of transparency that's unlike anything we've ever seen before. Think about like all the corporate drama at your old Web 2 job being blasted out on the forums for anyone to read, which is actually ends up better than you'd think. Okay, what can you do using on-chain governance? You can literally do anything. Like many things in crypto, on-chain governance is completely customizable. I think many have a view of it as you can only control the treasury. That's really not true. This is an example of all of the things that you can do with on-chain governance that have actually happened on Tally. So yeah, some diverse ideas there that I'll give you guys a sec to look at. But it's cool because DAOs can both be a way for you and your 3 friends to decide which movie to watch, on Friday night. Or it can be a way to move $80 billion through a recent proposal. Okay, there's still some challenges, obviously. Voter apathy, complexity, security, and scalability. I'll speak especially to voter apathy. I think this is the biggest, random dude critical thing of DAOs. You meet these people at the conferences, and they'll go, oh, I don't believe in DAOs. There's voter apathy. I think my common answer to this is delegation. Like I said, you don't have to delegate to one of two guys that you vaguely agree with. You can literally delegate to anybody else with a wallet address. This has been the solution to voter apathy thus far, and we're only getting better at encouraging delegation. Okay. I'll talk a bit about governance tooling. So this is an important one. If you're actually thinking about starting your DAO, you can feel free to chat me anytime. But you need sort of a stack of decentralization that ensures this degree of credible neutrality that you're looking for on the stack that you build on top of. These are the things you probably want to ensure that you have, one of each, maybe multiple of each. And like I said, none of these really contradict or compete with each other. Rather, they're more like complements, I think. Yeah, I think I'm coming to the end here, which is good. The rule of the DAO, DAOs often work in tandem with a foundation and a labs team. So like I said, when you're having your organization, you're wanting to be credibly neutral, wanting to encourage people to build on top of it, there's still a way to maintain, the organizational benefits of some degree of centralization. And that's typically through this three-pronged structure of foundation, DAO, and labs, where the DAO is completely controlled by the token holders. The foundation and labs have a bit of separate entities. Okay, that's it. Yeah, so find me later. I'm happy to chat about any of this and more. I put in the top there the other things that I was thinking about doing this presentation on. So Tally and myself are thinking deeply about liquid staked governance tokens, especially for their security benefits, and also multi-chain governance, which means you can make your DAO live on Ethereum layer 1 and run governance from any other layer 2 or multiple. But yeah, I'm lead business development at Tally. I'm happy to chat to you guys about starting up your DAO. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Cool Horse Girl. Does anybody have any questions just before you nip off there? Any good questions? Great slides. Totally pick her brain. That was really, really great. And the three speakers that we had in this first session, decentralized autonomous organizations, I think we really just got this super blast of the complexity and variety and interdomain awareness or knowledge that's required to really dig into this. So thank you so much, guys, for contributing to that discussion. And we've got our next session coming up is 12:15. So I think there's a little break between now and then. Feel free to jump on the speakers, pick their brains, have a break, and we'll see you back here at 12:15 for the next panel, which is on non-fungible tokens. Thanks, everybody.